Thank you very much. Canada is a vast country. A landmass of 8.3 million square miles. For context, there's 640 acres per square mile. So that's a pretty big ranch. And that may also be partly why the general public is not as concerned about the Wilmot situation as it should be. But when you take into account that less than 0.5% of that huge landmass is Class 1 agricultural land, then things come into a sharper focus. Across the country, that's only 12 million acres. Half of that is right in southern Ontario. And that's also where about 40% of the country's population is. It's very clear that the potential for land use conflicts is going to get us. That's why we're losing 300 acres a day across the province. It's been said that a land that's good for agriculture is good for everything else. Level topography, easy digging, natural drainage, and so on. And it's true. And again, that land is vied for by many different people for different uses. Alternative uses such as houses, roads, industry, they can be put onto lesser lands without too much difficulty. There are many cities in Europe that are built into mountainsides. Roads just about anywhere. Houses and factories can be put almost anywhere as long as fragile ecosystems aren't ruined. There's old pits and quarries of 800-acre size in this province that possibly could be used for industrial purposes as long as water table issues were resolved. Nation building is not about bringing everything into one municipality. So sometimes premiers or even municipal councillors sort of vie for the big sexy factory or something that's very topical. And nation building should say, where does it make sense for the country? Growing food, though, is a little more site-specific. It's impossible to take 100 acres of Wilmot land and exchange that for 100 acres in Sudbury or New Liskeard and expect anything in terms of the same yields, the same efficiencies, or the same viability. The highest and best use for this land is food production. And at a time when 1 in 8 households in this region rely on food support, it's absolutely unconscionable to permit the destruction of 770 acres of land. Another misconception about agriculture is that it's sort of a small potato sort of thing. There's still this image of old MacDonald's farm that persists. And it's true, many farms are small farms with 1 or 2 people managing them. But collectively, it's much different. There's 871,000 people in the province that are in the agri-food sector. That's way more than the auto sector. 1 in 9 people. Over in my home county of Perth, we're known for the festival theatre around the world. Yet, agriculture brings in more revenue than festival, theatre, and tourism industry combined, 4 times. We don't hear much about it on the news, but that's just the way it is. Now, suddenly with dramatic policy changes in the US, Canadians are scrambling for ways to diversify the economy. People are worried about escalating grocery prices, other cost of living factors, and somehow trying to build resilience into our economy, into our society. Agriculture is crucial to all these things. Aesop's fable about the goose that laid the golden eggs comes to mind here. But Douglas Ford's call for a snap election, saying he needs a stronger mandate to protect the people of Ontario, is completely disingenuous. With a strong majority already, he's failed to protect the 8,000 homeless people in the province and the 2.5 million people without a family healthcare provider. He's also failed to even follow his own government's planning statement from last August, which expounds on the need to protect farmland. I'm going to quote one paragraph directly from that planning statement. Planning authorities are required to use an agricultural system approach based on provincial guidance to maintain and enhance a geographically continuous agricultural land base and support and foster the long-term economic prosperity and productive capacity of the agri-food network. As part of the agricultural land base, prime agricultural areas, including specialty crop areas, shall be designated and protected for long-term use for agriculture. It's quite a run-on sentence, but it's there. Mr. Ford appears to be bent on gaining a longer leash just to borrow billions so he can spread it around his pet projects of highways, tunnels, and a spa. In lockstep, the region is also entirely disregarding the provincial planning statement concerning agricultural lands. Now, up on the world stage, the big dogs are chasing imperial dreams. Putin's invasion of Ukraine, Trump buying up Canada, Greenland, and now Gaza. But the smaller dogs look at what the big ones get away with and start wondering what they could grab too. Here in Ontario, Mr. Ford displays a dismissive intransigence, not backing away from this dangerous power play, hiding behind curtains of deniability, but absolutely is the puppeteer. One could be forgiven for calling the whole mess insanity. A number of years ago, a maritime journalist and environmentalist, Silver Donald Cameron, made a beautiful proposal that was to require governments of all stripes to run everything through a figurative filter when coming up with new policies, a filter that would vet the impact of economics, the environment, and social justice, all viewed through an ethical lens. So often a policy initiative comes from a government bureaucrat or whoever that focuses just on economic metrics without other factors. Things like environmental degradation from oil pipeline construction would never be addressed, nor would the social implications of maybe steamrolling Indigenous land rights, even though it looked like a good economic thing to build a pipeline. You get the drift. Now, if the principle was applied to this Wilmot situation, the land grab would not pass the sniff test on any of those parameters. It makes no economic sense to steal prime food land for an unknown a future industrial purpose. There's no urgency like there might be during a war. There's nobody that's been identified as an interested buyer. There would be a permanent destruction of the productive farm units that currently exist. And furthermore, a big corporate entity from another country that is being sought somehow would move the vast majority of its profits offshore to wherever the tax base was or tax rate was lower. Farmers spend the great percentage of their money within 100 miles of the farm. In this circumstance, the environment would lose big time. Again, prime food land's a precious resource, not to be squandered. And as Jen mentioned in the video, it took thousands of years for that soil profile to develop. And in a matter of months, it could all be gone forever. The water beneath the land base is also of great concern. It would be impossible not to have a negative impact should this go down Ford's way. The social justice part is particularly galling. The farmers at the center of this have endured more stress than any human should, especially from one's own government that purports to protect its citizens. Likewise, for the supporters of those farmers here. I've seen the strain in your eyes, heard the anguish in voices, and I stand here in admiration for all of you who have the courage to tell Doug Ford and the region that no means no. I don't suppose there's a single member of provincial government that would voluntarily give up their home, their property, their career, their life savings, their lifelong dreams, and the potential dreams of their children for the sake of an unknown foreign corporation. So why ask it of the farmers? As for the lens of ethics, the whole process has been a disaster, from the creation of a devious plan, sending in the high-pressure real estate bagmen, the NDAs, the corn crop destruction, the finger-pointing between different levels of government, on and on it goes. When trust in authorities has been so eroded, it leads to more questions. Was the whole thing brought on as payback to developers who lost out on the Greenbelt lottery? Was the chaos a race for dollars when the federal government was throwing money at EVs and housing plans that were very aggressive? Was the municipal government counting on a handsome profit for its role in the land grab? And when it didn't go as planned, the dramatic tax hike was tabled. I don't know the answers, but there's a bad smell in the air. It's definitely time for complete withdrawal of this attempted takeover. Mr. Ford is unlikely to have any luck in Washington changing Trump's mind on tariffs. But he could do something worthwhile at home, like pulling the plug on the land grab. Any future needs for industrial land should follow proper planning rules and be done with transparency and oversight. The well-known anthropologist Margaret Mead was once asked by a student, "What do you think the first sign of civilization was?" And this young student thought it might be a better design of fish hook or maybe a clay pot that would allow cooking meat on the fire. But no, Margaret said, it was a femur, a leg bone that had been broken and then healed. In those ancient times, a broken leg was a pretty sure death sentence. You couldn't run to catch your dinner. You couldn't run away from something that wanted you for dinner. You couldn't walk down to the river for water. Someone had obviously cared enough to stabilize that injury and then stayed with the person through a lengthy recovery period. It was care that was seen as the civilization's genesis. Today, we need leaders who truly care about the people in the land, not vain rulers who drool over the ill-gotten spoils of force. That would be a welcome mark of civilization. To any members of municipal or provincial government in attendance, I don't suppose there are any, but I'd ask you to reflect on the words of Charlie Chaplin, who said, "You should always tell the truth, then you don't have to remember what you said." To the farmers and supporters here tonight, stand your ground.